Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been in the cinemas recently, then you have probably seen the new Chainsaw Man reze arc movie that has just finished its theatrical run with international success. If you don't know already, Chainsaw Man is a story that takes place in a version of Earth where humans are forced to coexist with creatures called devils. Devils are eldritch beings that feed on humans, and a unique aspect of these devils is their names. Every devil in the Chainsaw Man world is assigned a concept, and the more feared that concept is, the more powerful they become. For example, something like the potato devil wouldn't really be all that strong because no one is scared of potatoes. But something like the cockroach devil would be a really strong devil because a lot of people, especially my mother, are scared of cockroaches. These concepts can range from physical things like swords and knives to even abstract ideas such as the future and eternity. Now, a lot of people on YouTube have already done videos about what the strongest devil would be, citing concepts such as death, pain, rejection, loss, applying to literally any kind of job in this economy, and even devils themselves. But what if we look at the opposite end of the spectrum? As in, what would be the weakest devil in Chainsaw Man? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, fear itself is defined by Wikipedia to be an unpleasant, subjective emotional state arising in response to perceived dangers or threats. This means that any devil with a concept that can pose as a threat to safety can invoke the sense of fear within humans and therefore strength for itself. So in order to find the weakest devil, we need to look for concepts that not only pose absolutely no threat to safety, but rather bring a sense of comfort and hope instead, since it has been confirmed that devils do get weaker when their concept starts becoming praised and loved instead of fear. Interestingly, finding what the weakest devil is actually quite a bit harder than finding the strongest due to the fact that a lot of concepts have some sort of fear factor tied to them. A great example of this is, well, the very first devil we see in the series, the tomato devil. Of course, nobody is scared of tomatoes nowadays, but did you know that back in the 15th century, tomatoes were actually thought to be poisonous in major parts of Europe? Yeah, I was kinda shocked that this was real, but apparently the acidity of tomatoes would make lead leach out from the pewter plates that they were on, hence poisoning the consumer. This would probably mean that the tomato devil would be fairly powerful in the Middle Ages, and even though its strength has drastically decreased, I don't think anyone outright loves tomatoes, and I personally don't find them to be quite that appetizing. Anyway, moving on from the food debate, another concept that everyone can universally love is of course domestic animals such as dogs and cats. Animals in general are very lovable creatures, but domestic animals specifically are even more loved because of the fact that we as humans can build genuine connections with them. Millions of people own dogs and cats who they love with every fiber of their being, so the dog and cat devil would definitely be very weak devils. Though with that being said, dog attacks do happen and they can cause a very slight fear of them. Though those attacks are still very far and few in between, and dogs are generally considered to be man's best friend. On the topic of friends, you might think that the friend and family devils would also be very weak. However, the thing with friends and family is that those types of connections can be prone to things like being backstabbed and betrayed, which can definitely be a source of fear for those types of things. Especially with friends, the fear of being backstabbed by them can be very great, as they unfortunately do happen, though of course most people do love their friends, and sometimes that love can develop into a romantic relationship, which leads me into the next concept, which is love itself. Now, I think we can all agree that we love love, right? Love is an emotion that is so biologically linked to us as humans that we literally cannot survive without it. Scientifically, the biological and emotional components of love originate in the brain's primitive emotional core, driven by a mix of chemicals like oxytocin and other related hormones that are crucial for attachment and survival. Though of course, much like the aforementioned friend and dog devils, love can be feared as human love is a terrifying, volatile concept. It is intrinsically tied to the fear of loss, rejection, betrayal, and vulnerability. Even Denji himself experienced the consequences of love in the reze arc movie, being betrayed by the one woman who... I can't even read my script, dude. being betrayed by the one woman who gave him actual romantic feelings.
Makima, I'm gonna catch you and I'm gonna eat you alive.
When I catch you, Makima, when I catch you, bro. Love in its romantic and familial forms is arguably one of the most powerful emotional catalysts for fear, resulting in powerful trauma and grief. The love devil could therefore be quite the powerful devil, feeding on the dread of a broken heart. Similar to the concept of love, the feeling of hope can also be a contender for being universally loved. However, the presence of hope requires the existence of despair, a negative reality where one can only hope because things are currently bad. Interestingly, hope creates its own counter-fear, being the fear of disappointment, the fear that the fragile dream will be crushed or that all the effort to turn things around will be for nothing. The hope devil would therefore draw its power from that fear of failure. Alright, so far we have concluded that most devils that have a universally loved concept can be prevented from being the weakest because their concepts have connotations that can affect one's future negatively. Whether it's fear of a dog biting you, fear of a friend betraying you, fear of being vulnerable with your partner, fear that things won't work out, or anything else. So what are the things that have absolutely no negative connotations for the future at all? Well, this might sound a bit ridiculous, but I think it comes down to concepts like puppies, pizzas, and Keanu Reeves. Now bear with me here, this will make sense eventually. Firstly, it should be pretty obvious why puppies do not pose any sort of threat or negative connotations, and there is probably not a single person in the entire world that doesn't absolutely adore puppies. They do not critique, reject, or judge humans, which means there is no social fear or anxiety involved, and they create a sensation of safe, domestic tranquility. The only emotion associated with puppies is the relief of fear rather than the generation of it. I also can't exactly recall the last time I saw a news story of someone being viciously attacked by a puppy. You might say that we strongly fear the loss of a puppy, but I think that contributes more to the strength of the lost devil rather than the puppy devil. Pizzas are part of the rare selection of foods that are universally loved, which is why it also makes it into my list. Not a lot of things in this world are better than getting some fresh pizza from an authentic Italian restaurant after a long day of school or work. Everyone needs some pizza once in a while, you know what I mean? It's like the one food we all need to try once, including you, Denji. Anyway, finally, Keanu Reeves is like the one celebrity that pretty much no one hates. He's an incredibly lovable dude who's also incredibly humble, so a devil formed from him would have really gone the shortest end of the stick when it comes to what human it's representing. Though, of course, since Keanu Reeves is a human, I don't know if he would get a devil, but I mean, the difference between like what devils get concepts is very vague because there is a fire devil and there's a flamethrower devil, so like it's very unclear on like what would constitute as a different enough concept that a devil needs to be born out of it. Like, there could be a dinosaur devil, or there could be a T-Rex devil and a Spinosaurus devil. It's all kind of like really confusing. So, you know, we can just move on from that. Hello everyone, Katakuri in editing here. Somehow during the recording I forgot to mention the chicken devil itself, which is definitely a major contender for being one of the weakest devils in the series, because obviously chickens really have no real fear factor, whether they are fried or not fried, except maybe when like you're being chased by an angry hen or something like that. Anyway, back to the video. Alright, so to conclude this whole video, the weakest devils in the Chainsaw Man world are the devils who represent the concepts that pose absolutely no threat and have no negative connotations for the future. So concepts like love and dogs are probably not the weakest of devils because they have those negative connotations. However, concepts like puppies, pizza, and Keanu Reeves do not have the aforementioned negative connotations and are only universally beloved, so therefore the devils that represent them are more likely than not the absolute weakest. Of course, the examples that I have mentioned aren't the only ones without any sort of negative connotations, and I'm sure there are plenty of other things in this world that have those same qualities that I didn't think of. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider clicking the subscribe and like button, it'll be greatly appreciated, and comment down below what you think. Are there any other concepts that might be even more universally beloved than puppies? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video.